few minutes. But we're just so happy to have you all with us tonight. He's going to give us a brief introduction to the brand new party. So Shane, take it away.
Thank you. Hello there. Happy to be here at Lakes Area Tea Party. Seeing a lot of friendly faces. Just want to talk a little bit about what I'm doing now with the Grand New Party PAC. As we all know, the Republican Party has failed us in many different ways over the course of really generations now. We've seen the utter failure in 2022. A lot went into that failure. There's a lot of things that we have to address and have to deal with and have to overcome. But the real root of the failure was the complete and utter betrayal by the Republican Party establishment, particularly in how they reacted to the 2020 election fraud. So just stabbing us in the back, signing on to that report, that denied the election fraud and said that election fraud whistleblowers should be essentially investigated and disbarred by Dana Nessel. Those sort of activities, not looking into the fraud, that just created so much distrust and disunity among the Republican ranks, and ultimately, people weren't willing to come back and trust the party, trust the process. So, where do we go from here? We're in a deep hole. There's a lot of ground that needs to be made up, but the one thing that we do have now, and that we should be very thankful for, is that through the turmoil, even though we lost the governorship, we lost the House, we lost the Senate, we have more conservatives elected into different offices than ever before. In the state house, in the county commissions, in different local municipal races like school board, and really, the most we see is at the precinct delegate level, where we have an overwhelming majority of patriots who are active and engaged like never before. So we have, yes. So we have something to build off of there. So I want to give you a message of hope, a message of optimism. Right now in the State House, we have the Michigan Freedom Caucus that is assembled similar to the way that the Congressional Freedom Caucus has assembled. And there we saw, in the U.S. Congress, there was like 20 or so people who united to stop the coronation of Kevin McCarthy, and that's already really done some good things. Stop the coronation of Kevin McCarthy, really forced some major concessions out of him in order to become House Speaker. And now what do we see? We see the January 6th footage on Tucker Carlson. And there's already some of the trials are being declared mistrials, kind of as the momentum builds against the January 6th hoax and the lies that have went into the investigation there. So what we can do at the State House level is build the same sort of conservative force. And we have a Michigan Freedom Caucus there now, led by Representative Steve Kara. Steve Kara is also the chairman of the Grand New Party PAC that I'm working with. So what we want to do at the Grand New Party PAC is we want to make sure that all these people who were elected into these conservatives who were elected in these positions, that they're not swept out immediately. We know that there's going to be big money efforts. We're already hearing about how there's going to be big money efforts just to go after precinct delegates and target who the patriotic precinct delegates are, recruit establishment people or pawns and try to run them out. But it's going to also happen at the local level, at the school boards, at the county level, at the State House level. So what we're doing is we're raising money and giving the institutional support and backing to the conservative movement. And we're not doing it by going to a bunch of angel donors and begging for money. You get a six-figure check from a massive donor like we've seen with the DeVosses or the Koch brothers. That money comes with a lot of strings attached. And that usually means that you're not going to be able to defend liberty. So what we're looking for is to cultivate a base of small donors that can come together and give what they're able to give, and that way we can coalesce pretty big sums of money around different people in areas who are, we know that they need the help. So there might be some really conservative people in areas like where they're not going to be able to be challenged, where it's going to be a slam dunk. And those really aren't areas where we want to get involved in. But there might be a conservative in an area who is embattled. Say they're on the school board, the teachers union is coming after them, and they're being attacked. They're in the media. They're being slammed on social media. They're being threatened. They're trying to be run out of office. Those are the people we want to support. We want to give the institutional support to the people who stand the strongest, and then as they go up in the ranks, we kind of build that bench. The way the left has so successfully, they've taken people running at the local levels and at the county levels and found who their champions were, and then filtered them up to the state house, to the state senate, and to US Congress. That's what we need. We need people with proven track records running for these positions of authority, rather than just people who seem to kind of tend to come, out of nowhere, run for these positions, and then they're gone forever. Or not all of them, but a lot of them seem to be. So that's what we're building. We're building the infrastructure. We're building the foundation for a stronger conservative movement in our state. It's definitely going to be a hard road ahead. I think that it's going to take more than 1 or 2 election cycles to really turn this around. But if we're successful, then when we do turn this around, we'll be able to fortify that conservative base so that when Republicans do get back in power, it's not just going to be like another 4 to 8 years of a Rick Snyder who's going to implement Obamacare and Common Core and all the other stuff that was so awful and basically be 90% of a Democrat. What we want is strong conservative leadership, and that's what we demand from the Republican Party. Otherwise, there's no point in having it at all. So the Grand New Party PAC is all about transforming, or I should say renewing, the Republican Party from within, creating the Grand New Party within the Republican Party that can sweep away a lot of the establishment and rhino tactics of old and have a strong conservative Republican Party in the state of Michigan. So if you want to check us out for more information, go to gnppac.com. That's gnppac.com. We already have initiatives that we're working on in addition to giving out money. We're also working on ways to strengthen the Republican Party. One thing is, I just talked the other day with Christina Caramo, and we talked a little bit about the proposal that the Grand New Party put out to change the open primary for the choosing of presidential delegates to the RNC next year, changing that to a closed caucus so Democrats and interlopers and other people can't come in and manipulate the process and put up the weakest candidate. And changing that to a closed caucus that would be decided on a county-by-county level by the precinct delegates. So I have a set of rules up there on gnppac.com. I'm talking to different state committee members about those rules, about perfecting those rules and making sure that the process is as good as possible. So we're going to be offering things like that, offering lasting solutions that will change the structure of the Republican Party moving forward in a more conservative way. So one more plug, gnppac.com, and I'll be here after the meeting if you have any further questions. Thank you.
So this is going to be a little bit of a combined introduction, but it'll make sense. So our distinguished guest tonight is Erick Kaardal, Special Counsel for the Thomas More Society. Erick graduated from Harvard and received his law degree from the University of Chicago. For the past 30 years, Erick's been in private practice, specializing in government relations. In other words, he specializes in suing the government. Erick is working as special counsel for the Thomas More Society, which specializes in pro-life, family values, and election integrity cases through the Vote Legal Initiative. As I mentioned, he graduated from Harvard in 1988 with magna cum laude honors in economics, and at the same time he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserves. After college, he attended the University of Chicago, where he graduated in 1992. He served about 10 years as a field artillery officer in the Illinois Army National Guard, U.S. Army Reserves, and Minnesota Army National Guard before retiring as captain. Erick and his wife Allison married in 1992 and have 8 children. Yeah, that really deserves an applause, doesn't it? So I first met Erick on Zoom calls when I was helping out with the Secure My Vote initiative in 2021. He took an amazing interest in eliminating what he calls serial election rigging in Michigan through a multi-pronged litigation strategies. Through our work together, I connected him with 2 key people in Michigan who are now working incredibly hard alongside Erick. One on election integrity, and that's Patrice Johnson. We're blessed to have her now heading up the Michigan Fair elections in partnership with the Thomas More Society. Unfortunately, I had wanted to have her here tonight, but she was unable to join us. The other area Erick's been actively working in is to rid our state of rogue sex education and working to offer Michigan children an environment that is safe and secure. In this parallel arena, you can applaud for that. In this parallel arena, Erick is working with another incredible team of people led by Nathan Paul. We have had Nathan Paul here before to tell us about the Great School Initiative, and he's here again tonight to give us a brief update. Nathan comes from the Walled Lake Citizens of Parental Choice, which was instrumental in ending the statewide mask mandates. And also sweeping the last Walled Lake School Board elections with 3 new school board members. So to start off with, we're going to please give a warm welcome to Nathan Paul.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Nathan Paul. I'm with the Great Schools Initiative. Just to kind of follow up on the lockdown kids, we found that the piss pots. We found that not only were they spending $30,000 on that, but they have over $1 million in a safety fund in the schools sitting there, and they've refused since 2017 to even discuss having armed guards in all the schools. So it's just been very, very frustrating. Anyways, the 3 women we put in there, awesome. They were fighting for us and saying all the right things and really working hard at it, making sure they weren't hiding that. So I want to talk about GSI. How many of you have heard of GSI? I know a number of you had, a number of you may have not. Thank you. So the Great Schools Initiative is a nonprofit, and we exist to transform public schools and to bring them back into basically an orthodox education through high impact projects. Think of us almost like a project management entity that is involved with projects that are going to impact schools all across Michigan. And so we do this by working on 3 key areas, and Erick has been really important. I'm sure you'll hear more about this from him in a moment, and influencing us on this. And it's his claim methodology, but the 3 areas that we really work on in these projects are really being able to manage the kind of the legal courtroom lawyering piece, the messaging piece, and then kind of the lobbying and putting policy in. And at the same time, we kind of manage that across multiple organizations across the state. So we have probably, I'm guessing, 60 plus other organizations that have partnered with us across the state. Some of them are small parent groups, some of our statewide groups, some of them are national groups that have now joined our fight on this. And this is, would you mind? Yeah, I got this again, sorry. It keeps flitzing out on here. And so this is an important project that we first started on, is what's called the Opt-Out Project, and that's dealing with what we call rogue sex education in schools. And the rogue sex education in schools is basically anything that, how many of you guys had a sex ed class? 5th grade, 7th grade, something like that. It's an anatomy class, that sort of a thing. That's going on, and that's traditional sex ed. But the rogue sex ed is they're having conversation about sexuality all over the place, in your math class, in your science class, in the hallway, you know, before school, after school, you name it, there's this kind of rogue conversation going on, and all of that is illegal. So we have investigators, actually like Kelly, everyone wave at Kelly, hi Kelly, she's one of our lead investigators. We have a bunch of investigators who have been digging into the law, digging into different school districts that are having problems with this. And we've uncovered that not only is there incredible laws that Michigan has, but these schools are violating them everywhere. And so our first big project is to really battle this. We have a number of other projects in the process as well. But so you have some idea that this is happening in our schools. The Michigan Department of Education is pushing this. And so it's happening in our local schools all over the state to differing degrees. There are organizations outside of our schools, federally, nonprofits that are also influencing. You saw Planned Parenthood on here, dumping tons of money and resources to push an agenda to basically radically sexualize children who didn't even know this was going on. They start gender transition stuff without them knowing, right? Changing their names and then giving them different clothes to wear and the like at school. So the GSI, our thing is not against LGBTQ, to be really clear about that. Even though that's the primary thing that's being pushed, but there's also heterosexual content that's graphic. I mean, beyond graphic. Some that's very violent that's being out there. Listen, sex ed is something that is allowed to be taught in Michigan schools under certain stipulations. The law is super clear on this, and this is what GSI is focused in on. That if you follow the law, you can have a sex ed class. If you don't follow the law, you're not allowed to do that. And so what we're doing is we're really working hard at trying to eradicate the rogue sex ed. Right? You can have a sex ed class. You can have, depending on your school district and what that school district votes in their SEAB, which is Sex Ed Advisory Board, and what they want to do with the curriculum, they can have a sex ed class. But parents have to have the right to opt out of that sex ed class. So this is what I want to make sure you know is the law. And these QR codes, if you use your phone, this will bring you to vlogs and different stuff on our website so that you can really quickly, okay, we'll move this out of the way a little bit. You can really quickly get to some of this information. We publicize things regularly about kind of the upcoming issues that we're facing here. But the law, MCL 380.1507, is super, super clear on this, that you have to have a sex ed advisory board. We're finding that many school districts don't even have that. Or if they have it, it wasn't formed correctly. It has to have both, you know, it has to have parents on it, it has to have local clergy on it, they have to have reports every other year. There's a whole bunch of rules tied to that. And many of the schools don't follow that at all. They have to be combined to a class. So you can't have rogue sex ed. It's super clear that you're not allowed to have rogue sex ed. It has to be in a particular class at a particular time with a particular curriculum that has been predefined so that parents can review it, and if they want to, they can opt their child out without any negative repercussions on their kid. So this is only allowed in an elective sort of class. So what do we do? I want to encourage you, you may have children in school, you may have grandchildren in school, you may have nieces and nephews, friends, neighbors. People need to know this. Many people still do not know their rights when it comes to what's going on in their children in the school. Our opt-out form that we created in conjunction with the Thomas More Society is robust. It has a section for the traditional sex ed, and it has a section covering rogue sex ed. So all these examples of all these things that are real things that are going on in Michigan schools, we kind of list them out. And you can basically, you sign up for it, you go to our website, you fill out a form, you get the form from the website, you sign that form, and you turn it into your local school. It's really quite simple. And then you watch and you listen to make sure that they're following the rules. And if by chance there's any resistance or violation, you let us know. This is really important. We are working with the Thomas More Society, and we are working to bring legal action against any school that violates that without cost to you as parents. And this is massive, right? Across the entire state of Michigan. So this form rejection is happening, where some schools are saying, hey, we won't even take this form, which is illegal, okay? So we have a process to go through. So if you're trying to turn your form in and someone says, no, I'm not taking that, again, go on the website, let us know, report it to GSI, and then, all right, technology is really not playing nice tonight. Then once you fill out that information on that, we will set you up with the attorneys. We'll kind of follow up, make sure you're real human, there's a real situation going on there. And then we will either give you a template of a letter that you can send off saying, here's the law, this is why you need to follow up. Or you can just ask us at GSI, and we can shoot a letter off on your behalf to your school district. If there's a violation, so the school accepts the form and they say, hey, I don't care, I'll take your form, but I'm still going to put these pornographic books in your kid's classroom and let them read it or whatever, let us know again. On our website, you can fill it out, let us know there's a violation. We have a whole intake process where we'll make sure that you are, again, you're a human, we make sure that you connect to the laws. Then as we go through that process, we connect you with the attorneys, and then we start that legal process there. So that you're clear, the legal process that we have with the law requires us to 3 steps where there's administrative steps. You first make a complaint to the school district. When they don't listen, you go to the intermediate district. When they don't listen, you go to the state, and then you get into court. We're prepared to walk with you through that entire process. Again, GSI, Thomas More Society, we're covering all the costs on that so that we can help support parents across the state put control of their schools back in their hands. So we'd like you to get involved with this. We would really appreciate any help getting the word out. That is the #1 thing. Get the word out. We're telling people this is important. Some parents are worried. They're saying, you know what, I don't want my kid, kind of picked on. And so I don't know that I want to put my form in. We're encouraging them to find other parents. Do it in a group of 5 or 10. Go in together and submit your form. The schools don't like this. They don't like lights on them like this. They don't like when a group of parents show up like that. There's power in numbers in that. It keeps you in the place of really being able to protect your children. It is our responsibility as parents to protect these kids and protect their innocence on this. So really, I appreciate it. Please go to greatschoolsinitiative.org. You can take a picture of that, go to that website, let us know if you'd like to support us in any way. You can help out there. We're always looking for investigators and people to support. Oh, here we go again. And to volunteer.
Well, I want to say yesterday I was privileged to be at St. Aloysius Gonzaga Parish in Romulus, Michigan. It was just fantastic. And while I was there, we sang Amazing Grace. And it caused me to consider what it is to be a missionary. After all, Father Gonzaga was a missionary. And, quite frankly, we find ourselves now in sort of missionary territory. I mean, if you haven't woken up yet, Marion told me she brought her red pill box. It's time to take the red pill because you're in missionary territory, so you got to start over. I mean, I know we pledge allegiance to the flag. When is the Republic going to pledge allegiance to us? This is a real problem that the government now is imposing its culture on the people rather than honoring the culture of the people. And so if you imagine this kind of practical reasoning that a missionary needs to understand the culture, understand how the politics works, how the legal system works, you ingratiate yourself with the people, you try to improve the government, improve the lot of the people. And so that's what we're trying to do here, right? Trying to ingratiate ourselves with the people, trying to figure out things culturally, legally, politically, and improve the life of the people. And so we can improve the life of the people by improving the government. And the government needs to be improved now because it's doing a very poor job. So why would you trust me with respect to practical reasoning? Well, as Marion mentioned, about 30 years ago, I said, well, maybe I can represent ordinary people suing the government. I enjoy disagreeing with judges, and suing the government was one way that I get into the courtroom, disagreeing with judges. And I decided to avoid fact-intensive cases, because you can do one fact-intensive case, and that can take up your whole year. But if you avoid those cases, then maybe you can sue the government 20, 30 times a year. And if you do that for 30 years like I've done, and God willing, I'll do it for another 15, 20, that's a lot of lawsuits against the government. Now, when you sue the government on a legal issue, that doesn't mean you can't tell the story. It's just you don't have to use a lot of legal resources to present the case and win or lose. So 1,000 cases against the government, 300 appeals, 2 victories at the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's why you should trust me that I've worked on the practical reasoning. But that's not really why I'm here tonight to talk to you about my legal career, but rather I want to talk about the practical reasoning. And so the entrepreneurs have a phrase called adjacent possible. And so adjacent possible is when you're doing something And then you like recognize, well, maybe there's something we could do in this adjacent area that would be interesting. So let's say you have a company that works on chemicals or something. They have a lot of chemists around. They might invite to every meeting a computer scientist to find out, well, maybe there's some application with computers that will produce a new product or a new way to do things. So my adjacent possible that I started about 25 years ago was working with an analytical philosopher who was trained at Wheaton and trained at Johns Hopkins in analytical philosophy. And so during my career, I worked on analytical philosophy. And I really worked hard. We co-wrote a few books. One's available on Amazon.com, Neo-Populist Counterculture. But one of the things I tell people is that we wrote the book to sort of defend common sense. So you don't really need to read it. You just need to understand that we wrote a philosophical defense of populism, common sense, citizen involvement to improve the government. And just to sort of prove the point, I wanted to read to you a summary of the book. And I was criticized last night for reading this before the Washtenaw County GOP. I'm not reading this to confuse you. I'm reading this because this talk is about common sense and practical reasoning. And I just want to demonstrate to you what lengths we went to defend the people's common sense and ordinary language. So in Christian Neo-Populism's Counterculture, Tom Dahlberg and Erick Kaardal introduce us to a postmodern democratic political philosophy which starts with the premise that politics is inevitably an extension of our cultural notions about the nature of reason and knowledge. And so the reformation of politics requires the reformation of the culture. Rationalist culture must be deconstructed in order to liberate us from the modern conception of government as ruled by objective truth. So the government doesn't own the truth. The government has its opinion, we have our opinion. Here's 3 simple lessons you could learn, but you don't have to read the book. So ordinary language has content, moral content. So when you talk about family, you talk about teacher, you talk about grandma, you talk about son, you talk about daughter, you talk about brother, sister, uncle, aunt. That has moral content, and it's worth defending. So when the progressives start redefining the words we use to describe ordinary life, we have to fight. Because family's worth fighting for. True education is worth fighting for. True sense of teacher is worth fighting for. And so those are things that are quite ordinary, but if you didn't know that there was a philosophy behind it, you may not realize you can go to your grave arguing, well, that's what a father is, that's what a mother is, that's what marriage is. That's okay. In fact, it's morally good to defend the ordinary meaning of these words. Another thing that you come across is that every account of reason is affected by one's view of the good. So one of the things you get taught is like everyone has access to reason. But actually things are split up now. You have the progressives, they have an account of reason based on their view of the good. We have our account of reason based on our view of the good. So we have different reasons. You can't reason with a progressive because they're not willing to compromise. And I mean, there's so much evidence of that. I mean, when we published the book in 2008, it wasn't as believable as it is today because of disputes over the word marriage. Now everyone sees this. Then the third one, this is tough stuff, right? The tough one is that you can have these views of the good with their own respective accounts of reason, and those accounts can be what is called incommensurate. That means there's no point of logical contact, no point of communication, no point of dialogue. So imagine in biblical times, if a journalist went and talked to the Pharaoh, well, everything's fine. The Pharaoh says the economy's good, the pyramids are getting built, everyone's being fed, blah, blah, blah. And that's the story you get. You get a pro-government story because the journalist just talks to the Pharaoh. But if the journalist goes and talks to the Jewish slaves, well, it's not going so well. They're slaves. And then you look at, okay, the people of God, versus the government. One of my favorite bumper stickers, is the Christian church surviving oppressive governments for 2,000 years. Isn't that beautiful? But that's because the government has a reason that's incommensurate with the people. So when you see the government imposing culture on the people, that's backwards. And so it's a different type of response is required. And so in that way, you might say we need to have people individuals representing the people. Oh my, okay, that's radical, right? We need to have GSI step up and say, we represent the families, we represent the students. We need election integrity folks to step up and say, we represent the people, we represent the voters. So why is that so radical? Why is it when I say, it's cheating when I say it because I'm a lawyer, I represent the people, but when you say, I represent the people, why is that so radical? Well, it's radical because the government believes it's subversive. So anyone who's been to public comment knows that, oh, okay, someone's in public comment saying, I represent the public, then the school district's response is, that's subversive, we were elected, we represent the people. And so you see that what's going on. And so when we wrote the book in 2008, published in 2008, populism was not a popular word in the United States. It wasn't used much by political commentators. But in 2017, because of Brexit and Trump's victory, Cambridge Dictionary declared it the word of the year. And so now it's used, and now you know what it means. It means when someone says, I represent the people, and the government views that as subversive because the government views itself as exclusively representing the people. Now I think when we took that red pill, we came to an agreement that the government's reason, the government's logic, that the government doesn't own truth. And so when the government errs, the people need to correct the government. And when you think about what kind of practical reasoning is required, I'm reminded of a GSI conference at the Cathedral of Mary, Mother of God, the Chaldean Cathedral. And I think I got that right. And we made a presentation and Bishop Francis said, look, when I was young, my parents could trust the school teachers. Now we can't trust the school teachers, so a different type of parenting is required. So when you think of GSI, it's rooting itself in this practical reasoning that parents are joining together with grandparents and others to say a new type of parenting is required in the public schools because we can't trust the teachers anymore. Okay? Now let's move to election integrity, right? So when I was young and my parents were with me, my parents could trust the election clerks. Now that I'm older, an adult, I know I can't trust the election clerks, so a different type of citizenship and participation is required. You think about that. So there I tied together two subject areas. I've been working in Michigan on the election integrity side with Michigan Fair Elections, Pure Integrity Michigan Elections, and I've been working with GSI Great Schools Initiative, and I've been applying with them the practical reasoning on both sides. So why are we making so much progress in Michigan in these two subject areas? And the reason is that we looked at this as sort of missionary work, and we used practical reasoning. So the left has instrumentalized your election clerks, instrumentalized your school districts to obtain progressive outcomes. And so they are using these things for functions they weren't intended to. They were intended to reflect the people's culture, the people's laws, the people's ideas, and they're reflecting progressive ideas. So with practical reasoning, we can point out what the problems with this weaponization of your election clerks and your public schools has caused. So let's give an example. So with the GSI project, as you noted, there was the parental opt-out form, and the parental opt-out form was sent into by hundreds of parents into the school districts. And we didn't know what was going to happen. It opted out of all this stuff. It opted out of sex ed, opted out of too many gay pride flags, opted out of gender pronoun surveys, opted out of the books we saw. We didn't know what was going to happen, but surprise, surprise, school districts across the state of Michigan operated like any other organization, and that is, well, they responded to complaints. So there was at least some accommodation to these parents who were objecting. But the Michigan Department of Education couldn't abide by that, right? So the Michigan Department of Education put out a memo saying these parental opt-out forms despite the law saying the parents can object in writing, can't be drafted by third parties. They have to be drafted by the school districts and signed. So the GSI parental opt-out form, this is the last sentence, is invalid, irrelevant, and inconsequential. Okay, so think about that. And then you think about, okay, that kind of sounds emotional, right? And so GSI provoked that kind of emotion, not from like the principal or the superintendent, but from the Michigan Department of Education. Imagine if before I start my case in trial court, the US Supreme Court issues its opinion, right? On the administrative side, it's sort of the same. Like GSI had just started contacting schools about the opt-out. So there was a book written by, actually I think it was a bestseller, written by Alistair McIntyre, a philosopher, called After Virtue. I think it was in the early 80s. And I read it, and I'm like, wow, it's a really good book, but it calls emotivism, emotional arguments, as sort of the enemy of our system. Like, people were like feeling rather than believing. And I go, well, geez, I've been in the courtroom. It seems like these lawyers I'm fighting, they always have reasons for what they're doing, and they're relying on legal doctrines. I don't know if I can buy that. But then, later he wrote a book called Which Rationality, Whose Justice, which kind of cleared it up in the sense of, as like I mentioned, that the progressives are now using doctrine and procedure to advance their cause. And so we need to get tough and propose doctrine and procedure back. And this is really hard-nosed stuff in the sense that the progressives have now taken the view in your schools through the Michigan Department of Education, basically that parents can't opt out of rogue sex education. That's doctrine and procedure, right? The doctrine is, we know better than the people, and we're not going to allow any parents to opt out. And so we have to respond by saying, well, the law says you can opt out. And so we have to say doctrine and procedure back. But these are how all the fights are going to happen. Another idea coming down the pike is the GSI is going to be talking about bathroom policies. What do we want in bathroom policies? Safety, security, and privacy. And we don't care what it costs, because no child should have any of those things violated. And so it's like, whoa, what's going to happen then? I was so naive to think if we guaranteed bathrooms were safe, secure, and private, that the progressives would agree with us. I made the mistake of saying that around one of the young associates in my firm. She's like 28 years old. And the next day she came back in the office, she said, no, I know these progressives, they're not going to agree. And it's something, she was right, because they want the conflict in the bathrooms. For them, it's necessary. So you are going to see the left turned into the biggest group of fiscal conservatives ever with respect to improving bathroom safety, security, and privacy. Just wait. Oh, we can't use that money to ensure the stalls are private. No. We got to use that for something else. And so it's worth going with policies that protect children, because that's practical reasoning, right? If the other side is instrumentalizing our children, if they're saying, we want your children to have these experiences with transgender students, we should gently push back, no, we want to have privacy, security, and safety in the bathrooms. So again, we go back to the practicalities of that. So let's go forward now to why this is a little complicated. So why it's complicated, it's not my fault, okay? But why it's complicated is there was a promise when our country was started, and that was in Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws, and that promise was you would have 3 branches of government and your liberties would be secured. And it hasn't worked out that way, but in order to work out of the situation we're in, we have to deal with all the complexities of government, because we have to improve government, sort of one government entity at a time. So, you can imagine, in order to get to those 1,000 lawsuits, I had to sue townships, cities, counties, drainage authorities, watershed districts, regional authorities, state agencies, federal agencies, public universities, public schools. So I just do everything. So I know about each of the entities. And so in order to clean up like public schools, you have to have a group like GSI focusing on public schools. In order to clean up elections in Michigan, you have to have a group like Michigan Fair Elections, Pure Integrity Michigan Elections, to clean up Michigan's elections. There's no getting around the hard work. Like my mother of happy memory, she said, Eric, success only comes before work in the dictionary. So to get out of this problem, we have to work really hard to improve the government. It's going to require this practical reasoning I'm talking about. And so let's talk about the Michigan litigation regarding elections a little bit. Some of you are Michigan electors that were for Trump in 2020, and the Biden electors sued the Trump electors for remedies in state court, and the reason why it was important for Thomas Morey to step in and represent them is one of the rules that we should have when we're fighting the government is we don't leave soldiers on the battlefield, right? And so if we're going to all fight the government together, if someone gets picked on, let's pick them up and carry them off the battlefield. And so we're doing that. We've taken steps to remove the case to federal court. We're in Grand Rapids, the Western District. We hope that turns out. Another thing that we did in Michigan in 2020 was we filed a lawsuit in Michigan challenging the Zuckerbucks, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, who put millions of dollars into urban election administration to create additional opportunities, in-person and absentee, for those people to vote, so everyone else was like second-class citizens. And then we did that in 7 other states, swing states. Now, we didn't win before the 2020 election. The money flooded these places. But as a result of our work in Michigan and other places, after the 2020 election, working with other nonprofits, 24 states passed laws banning private money in election administration. So that's an example of working together. Now, more recent example in Michigan, and we've been working here for a long time, is we've been investigating the Electronic Registration Information Center. So George Soros funded a Pew Research survey, how do we fix America's elections? And one of the recommendations was the Electronic Registration Information Center. David Becker, a progressive lawyer, designed it. And all these states, 32 states, joined it under the pretext that we need the Electronic Registration Information Center to clean up the voter rolls, but kind of the opposite happened. They also said they need us so we can recognize for you the eligible but unregistered, but the bulk of those people are people who go to your Department of Transportation here and decline to register. So the government doesn't need to transfer driver data to a nonprofit in order to find out who's declined to register. They could just send something to them directly. And so it's all kind of messed up because the function that they state apparently isn't true, or they're not doing it. But I'm afraid the real reason they're doing it is because if you're going to have a national resident database, government data is the way to do it. In fact, each of you, the Michigan Department of Transportation shares all your personal information in the driver database with this nonprofit. This would include your last 4 of your social, your driver's license number. They also share information about minor children who can't register to vote and non-citizens who can't register to vote. So this is a massive violation of what's called the Driver Privacy Protection Act. So the Driver Privacy Protection Act is a federal law saying certain information can't be shared, only if exceptions apply. And there are exceptions, like 12 exceptions for like creditor remedies, litigation, public safety, motor vehicle safety, but there's not one for voter registration. And so they tried to shoehorn in one of these other ones, but it doesn't apply. And so they took this calculated risk when they did it, and look, they've gotten away with it for several election cycles. And so they're like, oh, we got away with it. But Thomas More Society decided to take action. And so we decided, hey, look, we actually think they're saying that they get the data and then they send it back. But if you look at the contract carefully, when the state shares data that Erick provides them, then the state has to tell Erick about it. But when Erick shares the information with others, it doesn't have to tell the state about it. All right, so it's backwards. And so we filed 4 administrative complaints, one in Michigan, one in Pennsylvania, one in Wisconsin, one in Minnesota. And the two proceedings went to hearing, and that was in Pennsylvania and Minnesota. And the Pennsylvania is a critical one. In Pennsylvania, the Deputy Secretary of the Commonwealth, in testimony when asked, admitted that after the Secretary of State signed off on the Erick contracts like in Michigan, Erick comes around with verbal questions saying, can we share the data downstream? And Pennsylvania admitted to sharing information with the progressively aligned organization's driver data called Center for Election Innovation Research, another David Becker operation. So the first disclosure is illegal, and then the downstream disclosures are also illegal, but they're horrendous when you consider your driver data is being used to create progressive national resident database that's used then for micro-targeting. Okay, so then we had a transcript of what the Secretary of the Commonwealth said. One of the things that was encouraging us was that Louisiana and Alabama had already pulled out. Then at the Erick meeting last week, after we had threw representatives away, we communicated our information to the Missouri Secretary of State, and according to his press release, he was the one that led Missouri, Florida, and West Virginia out. Then we just got news that 5 other Republican states, including big states like Texas and Ohio, are on their way out. So when Thomas More Society started, like against Zuckerbucks, everyone was doing it. Then 24 states dropped out. Then we took on the Electronic Registration Information Center, and we were at 34, then it went down to 32, now it's at 29, and we might get down to 24. And so this is huge progress, but the reason we're getting there is because the Michigan groups are investigating the facts. They got really smart people, and we're working with the Wisconsin folks, Ron Hoyer, Wisconsin Voter Alliance, Heather Honey in Pennsylvania's Verity Vote, and they're just doing really good investigative work. So one might ask, well, how do you work with these associations? How do you work out the practical reasoning on a daily or weekly basis? Well, I came up with an acronym, and mostly the acronym was intended to put the courtroom lawyer in his own place. That's me, right? And so the problem was that if everyone looked to me, everything wasn't going to get done. So the acronym is CLAIM, working backwards. The most important thing is messaging. We need to communicate to people what we're doing. The I is for investigation. You need to investigate what the government is doing before you make public comment, so you're accurate, right? The same thing with investigating for lawsuits or for messaging. The A is for administration. We look for GSI to administer itself. We look for Michigan Fair Elections to administer itself. The L is for lobbying. Lobbying is a great way to go. Public comments, one way to do it. Letters to the school district, letters to the clerks, letters to the Secretary of State, legislative hearings, so forth, any kind of lobbying. And then the last thing is courtroom lawyering, which can be expensive. And you note that we filed those 4 administrative complaints, got the information we needed, and then now these red states are leaving Erick. I mean, that's fantastic because we don't have to file lawsuits in those states. Just like to stop Zuckerbucks, we don't need to file lawsuits in those states. Now, so we worked through that claim methodology. Let me tell you, yesterday I was walking around the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and I was investigating the crime scene, right? And so basically, you can go on the website for University of Michigan, look at Ginsburg Center. And so the Ginsburg Center is basically the focal point for a massive get out to vote campaign for the university students there. But not only do they lead the efforts at the University of Michigan from the Ginsburg Center, but they also administer the Big Ten Challenge, where they coordinate all 14 universities to compete to get the highest university student voting rates. And then of course you have to follow the money and the laws, right? So the money is coming from the federal government, it's coming from state government, and it's coming from 501c3s. The 501c3s over many election cycles have organized your public university, University of Michigan, Michigan State, to focus their resources during the election cycle on getting all the university students to vote. So it's really beyond the pale when you think about it. There are a lot of complaints over the years from conservatives. oh, this university's woke, or this classroom's too far left, or whatever. This is literally turning your university into a political weapon for the left. And so the Internal Revenue Service has put out a memo saying 501c3 funds cannot be used for targeted voter registration drives or targeted voter education. And what could be more targeted than university students, right? And so the nonprofits have contracts with the universities to administer these programs. Your municipal clerk in Ann Arbor has an agreement with the public universities, which has an agreement with 501c3s to have additional voting places there, to have satellite offices of the clerk's office. Well, then why not put those next to nursing homes? Make it more convenient for them. I mean, there are all sorts of precinct locations around the university. Why not use them? Why do they need these extra places? But they're trying to get as close to 100% as possible. And sure, if it was a campaign, that's fine, but you have your government officials working in this voter registration. Now we have a lawsuit we're filing tomorrow in East Lansing. So what's going on in East Lansing? Well, the East Lansing has adopted an ordinance which says that landlords have to deliver voting information to their tenants before an election. So in the olden days, you'd say, oh, okay, well, that's fine. But no, we're smarter now because the partisanship has gotten into registration, right? So we have a landlord we're going to represent, or we're going to sue in 2020. We won a similar lawsuit in Minnesota because St. Paul and Minneapolis had done the same thing. Now, Ypsilanti has the same type of ordinance. So we're looking for a landlord there, and we'll continue until we rid the state of all these ordinances or the state legislature passes a law banning this type of ordinance compelling landlords. Now that's an interesting case because if you're involved in practical reasoning, your best argument in that case isn't an election integrity argument, is it? The best argument is, what kind of a government compels a citizen to talk to his neighbor, talk to his tenant, talk to his fellow employees? The government can't deputize you to give speech, to compel speech to another. I mean, that's a very powerful argument. Once the government starts compelling, like, parents to talk to their children in a certain way, it's like over. And so we're working on that case. We're going to file that tomorrow, and we're going to drop a press release. We're also monitoring cities and counties in Michigan accepting more Center for Tech and Civic Life money. I spoke to the Livingston County Board, I guess it was last year. They adopted a resolution rejecting any CTCL money. Another county or two did. And then we got the big news when Center for Tech and Civic Life tried to give $500,000 to Ottawa County in Michigan. They said no. And it was a nice win on rejecting private money in election administration, although we can't get the governor here to sign off on the ban on private money in election administration. So when we get back to it, what I want to summarize here is that the government has now gotten a position where the people aren't being respected, our traditions, our customs, and the way we go. And so then if you think about what do you do if the government's trying to impose its culture on us rather than we imposing our culture on the government? And what we have to be, because we have a lot of democratic procedures left, we got, each branch can be lobbied, school districts can be lobbied, we can win elections, that we have to really reorganize and think about ways to use practical reasoning so that our ideas become popular. We need to really think about, how do we do this? So the parental opt-out's a good example because you get to talk about everything, but they won't let parents opt out. So you can talk about anything that would be objectionable at the school, and they're saying whatever is objectionable at our school, your child has to sit there and take it. And so their position is very unreasonable. It's reasonable to them, but to most people, look, the parent's going to go to the trouble of signing a parental opt-out form, let the kid out, right? And so you can win. On the bathrooms, the same thing. If the policy is for safety, security, and privacy, why is the other side objecting? And then the other thing we're working on is viewpoint neutrality. Someone's told me today, well, the secularism, it's almost like a religion. Okay, well, that might be true, but that's hard to prove. But there are doctrines in the federal courts saying that whenever the government puts out a display or allows private groups to display, it has to be viewpoint neutral. So this idea that whatever they put up is not political, and everything we would put up is political, we have to end that day, because it's not true. They put up all their propaganda. If we put up if one of our teachers put up one piece of propaganda, all hell would break loose. And so we need to level the playing field there. Thank you. And so when we work through those ideas and ideas on the election integrity side, you can see how moving back and forth, the premium is on this idea of practical reasoning and common sense. So where we can find a place to improve the government and we use ordinary means to accomplish that end, we will be appreciated and we will be the ones that are winning. So one point I want to raise about, there's a book in Colorado that was written many years ago called Operation Blueprint. It described how the left organized through 501c3s, donors and so forth, and they created this national, in that case statewide, resident database to do the micro-targeting for registration, for get out to vote, and for political advertising. They did it. There's a WikiLeaks released document from Podesta's computer in 2015, and they laid out this vision of having national resident voter database. They said it would cost up to $250 million and take 3 election cycles, but we can do it. So you can imagine they have a data-driven campaign, they have a data-driven sort of system, and so you see something like Biden saying we're going to cancel student loan debt. Well, they know who had the student loans, right? So are they going to get the votes of the people in their system who have student loans if they say they're going to cancel the student loans? I mean, that's dirty, dirty, dirty. And we can clean that up, but we're only going to clean it up if we investigate what they're doing. Now, on our side, we need to have a better database. We need to start tracking who supports our points. But you know what we're going to do differently than? We're going to poll the people and find out what they want. Do you want all this LGBTQ signage? Do you want parental objections to be honored? Do you want safe, secure private bathrooms? Do you want the University of Michigan to be nonpartisan? It just goes on and on. All our positions are popular. We just need to make sure that the people understand the relevant set of facts that they should make the decision on. And one of the things I think we should not be discouraged by is the media, because the media is just part of their package. And so that their journalists are just talking to the Pharaoh. If their journalists came and talked to the people, the stories would be the opposite. And so just think about that if the journalists just talk to the government side, it's always in this world going to be against the people. If you look at it from the people's side, the people need a better government so they can have improved lives. So I think that there's a struggle here, but I think as sort of missionaries in our own country, we have a plan here working through this practical reasoning, and in the election integrity area and the public schools area, we're already succeeding. And so you can see we have minimally viable products. We basically have found a way to, with the resources we had, to present to you in these 2 subject areas, I would say almost a complete agenda to win future elections. How did that happen? Well, because the left has gone so far with the government that it's oppressing the people. And so what are we doing? We're just pointing it out. I mean, do you think it was tough for Moses to convince the Jews that they were being maltreated? No, that was the easy part. The tough part was leading them out, right? And so as we all maybe we should all have a red pill box and just hand them out. And as people wake up the fact they now have to be missionaries in their country, I think they'll realize that they can win. And it's just very, very exciting. And I'll close on a G.K. Chesterton quote, one of my favorites, and that the only glimpse of heaven you get here on earth is fighting a losing battle and not losing, right? And so we may not see the fruits of the victory, but we'll lay the foundation for the generations to come. Thank you so much.
Okay, so now Eric talked a little bit about the Trump electors. So I'm a Trump elector. Woo! Want to stand up? Clint is a Trump elector. No, don't cheer for us. There's 16 of us, and we're being sued by Biden electors. And if it wasn't for the Thomas More Society to step up and say, we're not going to leave any soldiers behind, we're going to come and help defend you, I don't know where we would be. So, you know, we're so indebted and grateful to them. But really, we are all soldiers that have been left behind in Michigan, aren't we? Yeah. No one has stepped up to defend us, our election integrity as far as our schools are concerned. Only the Thomas More Society has stepped up to defend us. So, okay, so the applause was very nice. But I'm asking you, it's like, will you step up and support the Thomas More Society in some way to help show our appreciation for all that they're doing in Michigan? I mean, it's incredible. I know that Erick only probably talked about some of the things they were doing. It amazes me when we talk about electronic registration information center, that now 3 states just dropped out this week. There's another 5 states that poach it. I mean, this is the lifeblood for election rigging.
Right.
I mean, so this is huge, people. I mean, like, we were at an event last night, and I'm just like, maybe they just don't get it. But I'm doing cartwheels inside that these states have dropped out. And that we have potentially 5 more, one of them Texas, Ohio, this is huge. If we want to reclaim our country, it's so important that we end up cutting off this lifeblood of illegal, their pool of people that they could go to and just say, here's 500,000 dead people, we'll just vote for them. Here's 500,000 people that moved out of state, but that's okay, we'll just vote for them in Michigan. So it's just, so I just can't tell you what the Thomas More Society has done for our state. And I'm just like asking you to please find it in your hearts to write the Thomas More Society a check. You can go to their website, it's gone, it's thomasmoresociety.org. This is different. This Thomas More Society is out of Chicago, not the Ann Arbor. I just want to clarify. That's a law firm. This is a national organization. So please look them up. So now we're going to wrap up, and we have door prize drawings. Kathy Kubik. Anybody? A jar, something. Everyone, I'm so happy that you're all so here and you listened, to all of Erick's talk.
Will we get cash or checks?